the willingness of the customer to buy specific product at a particular price. This is simple, the definition of the demand. Okay, and further we discussed some different terms like demand curve. Okay, the demand curve basically the graphical representation of the price and the quantity demanded by the consumer. Okay, if data were plotted, it would be an actual curve. Okay, and economists however use straight lines so as to make it an analysis very easier. Okay, so if you remember, we have discussed two more definitions, that what is the difference between individual and the market demand. Okay, if we talk about one man perspective, that the man who is willing to buy a specific kind of a product at a particular price, this is known as individual demand. But whenever we talk about from the sense of the whole market, or if we add one or more individual in our definitions, then they will count it as the market. Like we discussed that if we talk about the cigarettes, okay, at a particular price you want to buy a cigarette. If I am talking about from your point of view, that's mean I am talking about at micro level, mean we are talking about just one person. But if I include more than one pupil in that particular definition, then it would be the demand of the market. Okay, market demand basically is the combination of all individual demand for goods and services. And for example, if you look at on the screen, we have consumer one, for example, its demand is 30. Then we have consumer demand, for example, its demand or their demand 15. Consumer third, we have a 4. Consumer 4, basically they are demanding 4. So what would be the market price? What we will do, we will add the demands of the all individuals, okay, and the sum of amount will be our market demand. And if you remember, we already discussed some of the factors that can influence the demand, and these factors were price, like price of the product. If you remember the law of the demand said that if the price of the product will be increased, the demand for that particular product will be decreased. So what are the factors? The first factor we have basically price of the product. The idea will remain same, that if the price of the product will high, the demand of that particular product will be down. The next factor we discussed is substitutes and the complement. Substitutes are those that basically replace the product we have in hand. Okay, if the price of the substitutes will decrease, might be possible that we will switch to the that particular substitutes. But if the price of the substitutes will high, we will stick ourselves, or we stick on the product whatever we have in hand. Okay, and similarly, if we talk about the complements are those products basically which use along with the product whatever we have in hand. Okay, for example, if I talk about sugar and tea, if the price of the complement will high, opposite to the substitutes, if the price of the product will high, what we will do, the product we have in hand will not be used further. But if the price of the complement will go down, whatever the product we have in hand, we will use it on a regular basis. If we talk about the gross income is like total income that any individual is receiving from their salaries. If the government increase the tax onto that particular kind of the income, that is another factor that could you can say affect the demand of the individual. And the last one we have basically habits and the trends. Sometimes the person has a habit, so demand may affect or may not affect because of that particular man habit, and the trends depends on the product trends. If the trend of that particular product is high, the demand will be that particular kind of a product will also be high. If trend is not on its peak, the product of that particular demand will be down. If you remember, we discussed some of the graphs in our demanding position. Now you see we are talking about the market demand for children, for example combination of the boys and the girls demand. At a price of $10, the shop's market demand during July in 1900 units. If you look at the graph, the first is representing the boys. If you look at the y-axis, we have a price, and in the x-axis we have a basically quantity demanded by the boys. Okay, at the price of the 10, the boys are demanding 500 quantities of that particular product. If you look at the graph number 2, this is basically individual graphs that represent the girls gender on a on a similar price, which is basically $10. The boys were demanding 500 quantities and the girls are demanding 400 quantity of the product. Now what we will do, if we want to make the curve or the graph of the whole market, Sharis, what we will do, we will add the demand of the boys and the demand of the girls on that specific price level. If you look at the total customer, if you look at the third graph, now you can see at specific price level the total demand is 900. Okay, this is simple graphical representations of the individual and the total demand of the market. Okay, so diagram analysis. A shop sells both boys and the girls swimwear. In July, at price of $10, the demand for the boys is 500 and the unit of the girls is 400 units. That was a simple graphical representation of both girls and boys, and if we combine them both, this becomes the market demand at a particular price.